Good morning, and welcome to Glendale's 2019 Memorial Day ceremony. I'm Carl Povolitis, and I'll be your Master of Ceremonies for this year's program. While Memorial Day, for many, marks the beginning of summer, the true significance of this day is that we gather to remember those who have made the ultimate sacrifice so that we may live in freedom. We may not have known them personally, but we take this time to remember and honor their service and their commitment to an ideal and their sacrifice to a cause greater than themselves. They were common people with an uncommon commitment, true heroes. Today, at this ceremony, we are keeping our commitment that they will never be forgotten. At this time, if you would please rise and join Pastor Shane Kinnison for the invocation. Dr. Kinnison is the pastor at the First Baptist Church here in Glendale, and he is also the chaplain for Glendale Elks Lodge 1289. Please continue standing at the conclusion of the invocation for the presentation of colors by the Crescenta Valley High School Junior ROTC, the Pledge of Allegiance, and the singing of the national anthem.
Thank you, Chief. Let us pray. Lord God Almighty, Creator of all mankind and author of peace, we gather in this solemn assembly to remember, to reflect, and to respond as we consider those, the living and the dead, who have sacrificed themselves for the liberties of our citizenry. We invoke your blessing on our political and military leaders, that they may tirelessly seek peaceful settlements to international disputes. We ask that you will preserve the members of our Army, Navy, Marines, Coast Guard, and Air Force from harm. We petition that even in war, we may keep clearly before us the defense of all human rights, especially the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We implore on behalf of the families of our military members that they may be strengthened in times of concern and anxiety, so that they may cope with daily challenges in the absence of their loved ones. We pray that our homeland will be preserved from violence and terrorism from both foreign and domestic enemies. We ask the nations of the earth will seek to work together in harmony and peace. We request that the hearts of all human beings will be moved to pursue peace and justice, that peace will replace war, that weapons of destruction will be transformed into tools of justice, and that hate will give way to true charity and unconditional love. May we be grateful for and inspired by all veterans of all time who have given their lives for our country, that we may be empowered and emboldened to bravely face the challenges ahead. To you be all glory and honor, both now and forever. Amen.
I'd like to invite Lynn McGinnis to the stage to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Lynn is a 36-year resident of Glendale, served in the United States Air Force, and taught 10 years at Rosemont Middle School, and is currently active with American Legion, Verdugo Hills Post number 288. As a reminder, veterans in attendance, in uniform or not, are encouraged to salute the flag using the hand salute as encouraged by the United States Code relating to the pledge.
An anonymous author wrote, "Our flag does not fly because the wind moves it. It flies with the last breath of each soldier who died protecting it." It is in the memory of these heroes that we salute Old Glory this morning. Please join me in honoring Old Glory, now in her 244th year. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation
Please be seated. And let's thank the Glendale College Jazz Ensemble and their choir for the wonderful rendition of the national anthem. This year marks the 75th anniversary of Operation Overlord, more commonly known as D-Day. On June 6, 1944, the Allies stormed the beaches at Normandy. Over 156,000 Allied troops would eventually land on those beaches with code names of Omaha, Utah, Gold, Juno, and Sword, with the heaviest resistance being found on Omaha Beach. On that day alone, 4,000 Allied troops would make the ultimate sacrifice to begin the liberation of Western Europe, and more than 2,000 of those casualties would be American. Maybe the words of Dwight D. Eisenhower will give us some insight to the commitment of what has been called America's greatest generation when he said, "You are about to embark upon the great crusade, toward which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you." This crusade would continue until May 8, 1945, when Germany would officially surrender. As we look back over the years, the sacrifices of our men and women in uniform have been many. Over 116,000 gave their lives in World War I, over 405,000 in World War II, 54,000 in the Korean War, 58,000 in the Vietnam War. And after the attack on 9/11, the United States would be pushed into the war on terror. As in the past, brave Americans, our sons, our daughters, our brothers, our sisters, our friends, would be called to serve their country. And many would answer that call. And over 8,000 have made that ultimate sacrifice, all to serve a cause greater than themselves. And I would just like to take a moment to recognize the families who are here today, whose loved ones whose names are inscribed on this memorial wall. And today, and they've been with us for many years, we have both the Ravago family and the Babarsa Flores family, which if you would please just acknowledge them and their sacrifice. We have several dignitaries with us today, and so I'd like to take a moment just to introduce them. Representing Congressman Adam Schiff, we have Mary Hogevimian. The Congressman has been a regular attendee at this ceremony, but this year he is actually overseas visiting our American troops who are committed to keeping our country safe. Representing the 25th Senate District, Senator Anthony Portantino is with us. Representing the 43rd Assembly District, Assemblymember Laura Friedman. Representing the 5th Supervisorial District from Los Angeles County and Catherine Barger, Jared DeGonia. From our Glendale City Council, we have Mayor Ara Najarian, Councilmember Zare Sinanian, Councilmember Vrej Agajanian, Councilmember Paula Devine, Councilmember Vartan Garpetian. We have former mayor with us, Carl Raggio. From the Glendale Unified School District, we have board members Shant Sahakian and Armina Garpetian. We have our city treasurer, Rafi Manukian, with us. City manager, Yasmin Beers. And Fire Chief Silvio Lanzas. And if you are a veteran of any of the services, would you please stand and be recognized? It is nice to see so many of you here to remember your fallen comrades in arms. Thank you. And I'd also just like to take a moment for someone who is a driving force behind the building of the memorial. Raul Mina is also here with us today. At this time, I would like to introduce the Honorable Ara Najarian, Mayor of the City of Glendale, to come to the podium and make some introductory comments.
Thank you, Chief, and good morning to everyone. It's heartwarming to see so many of our Glendale friends, family, community members here attending this solemn event. I'm very happy to see everyone here. Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, today we celebrate Memorial Day. Across our proud nation, this Memorial Day weekend, we remember the men and women of our armed forces who made the greatest sacrifice imaginable. Whether it was on the battlefield of Antietam, the beaches of Normandy, or in the mountains of Afghanistan, hundreds of thousands of Americans have taken up the mission to defend our nation, ideals, and freedoms at home and abroad, knowing that they may not survive. This Memorial Day, let us pause to pay honor to their immense courage. It is remarkable that our fellow citizens were willing to pay such a high cost for our own freedom. They, and those like them, deserve every honor that we can bestow. Memorial Day weekend often serves as an opportunity for Americans to spend time with friends and family. As we consider the cost of our freedom, let us also remember the families of our fallen, our Gold Star families. As we remember the sacrifices of our fallen service members, we also recognize the tremendous loss to their families and admire their patriotism and perseverance. Despite all of these sacrifices, the struggle to preserve our freedom continues. Just as in times past, our enemies seek to threaten the freedom for which our American brothers and sisters have laid down their lives. These enemies don't just fight our troops on the battlefield anymore. They have attacked the integrity of our electoral system and our freedom of speech, while seeking to reverse our progress against racial inequity and religious freedom. One of the best ways to honor our fallen comrades is for us to work together to defend our freedom and our American principles. We cannot allow the erosion of the liberties our family members and friends have fought so hard to defend. As I pray for the fallen and their families this weekend, I will also pray for our men and women currently serving in harm's way and for their families too. I am truly grateful for those who have served our country, past and present, and I will continue to do my very best to serve them in return. Thank you.
Good morning. What a solemn day to be here in Glendale, and thank you, Glendale, for putting on this very important program. If everyone here could do me a favor, turn to the person next to you, shake their hand, introduce yourself, because we're all in this together celebrating and recognizing. And if it's a veteran, say thank you. If you're sitting next to a veteran, thank them for their service. You know, we oftentimes come to these things, we sit down and we don't even talk to the person next to us. Because what affects one of us affects all of us. So I just think it's important to start there. This is truly a solemn day, and I'm so glad Mayor Najarian recognized the Gold Star families. And, you know, men and women go off to war, and a large percentage of them don't come home, but their families are here. And so it's important that we respect the families and the legacy of those brave men and women who have paid the ultimate sacrifice. This week, at the commencement address at West Point, the graduates were told, "It is a certainty that you will be fighting in battle on behalf of our country in the near future. It is a certainty you will be fighting in battle." And the speaker stopped there and didn't mention the second sentence, which was implied, that some of you won't come back. Today, we celebrate those men and women who haven't come back, who haven't returned. So tomorrow when we go to work, today, this afternoon, when we sit home with our families and we barbecue, their loss allows us to do that. During the West Point graduating class, there were almost 30% were women who were stepping up to serve our country as second lieutenants this week, which they weren't last week. To me, that's a profound part of our history, that there are so many brave men and women willing to step up and pay the ultimate sacrifice. We also can't forget that every day 22 veterans commit suicide in America. Let me say that again. Every single day we lose 22 veterans to suicide. So we have to make sure that the men and women who pay the ultimate sacrifice are remembered, their families are respected. This morning in Montrose, it was very powerful as Mayor Najarian referenced his cousin Michael, who was on the wall. And when he moved here, his family got to see a Najarian family member respected and remembered on that memorial. And I always say that the most dramatic part of any of those memorials to our fallen soldiers are the blank ones, are the space holders. Because like that commencement address implied that some of those men and women won't come home, when we build the memorials and think about Two Strike Park, there's places for future lost soldiers. To me, that's a powerful image. And so I appreciate and respect Glendale for honoring our fallen soldiers, their families, and having this wonderful solemn day to do that. So thank you for letting me be part of it, and thank you for doing everything you do to respect the men and women in uniform, out of uniform, and those who paid the ultimate sacrifice.
Good morning. I'm Laura Friedman, and it's my honor to represent you in the State Assembly on this day of solemn reflection and remembrance to honor those brave generations of men and women in our armed forces. I'd like to personally express my gratitude by joining you today. The fallen men and women that we're honoring today are those who gave their full measure, and they did so out of the ultimate commitment to duty, to country, and to our core values of liberty, equality, and justice for all. To be honoring them is a great privilege for all of us, and I humbly appreciate the opportunity to be able to be with you here today to do that. I believe it's important for us to remember today that with each name etched in stone on the monuments throughout our district and across our nation, there was a real human life behind that name. There was a parent, a child, a coworker, a friend, a neighbor, and those people lived full lives, and we mourn them and all of their stories just because they lived lives as rich as yours and mine, and they were willing to go and sacrifice their lives and put their lives at risk for those children, those parents, those neighbors, those coworkers. The heroic deeds of our fallen number in the millions. Millions of Americans have lost their lives in armed conflicts. And I tell you that not to diminish any single one of their importance, but to give you a picture of the great scale and magnitude of the collective sacrifice of those that we're honoring today. It's awe-inspiring, it's an awe-inspiring act, and it's the very foundation of all else that we love. Those millions of lives are all themselves worthy and deserving of monuments and remembrance, all those who paid the price for our freedom, our way of life, and most importantly for peace, because that peace is not free. In the words of General Douglas MacArthur, the soldier above all others prays for peace, for it is the soldier who must suffer and bear the deepest wounds and scars of war. War comes with an incredible cost. The pain and loss of those families, loved ones, and companions of the fallen leave wounds that can never fully be healed. I believe that we're all gathered here today because we know deep down that we can never truly pay back that price. But we also know that we all have a part to play to do that, to honor them. For being given the gifts of their sacrifice has brought and continue to bring, we all have ourselves a responsibility. And I'll leave you with this. We know that everything has a cost. There's no greater price on this earth than a life, and it's our responsibility to pause and reflect on that today. It's our responsibility to remember that we must take their sacrifice further by committing to defend our nation and our Constitution. We all have an opportunity to fulfill the promise of a brighter future that our soldiers died defending. We have an opportunity to remember today, to transform our patriotism every single day to a daily tribute to the fallen and their sacrifice in our nation by holding to our commitment to work towards peace, to push for justice and equality in our own communities, and to never forget that every day we live in privilege given to us so selflessly by our heroes. And I know that we have amongst us Gold Star families. We have those amongst us who are still suffering every day those losses. And I say to all of you that today we mourn with you, that we are a grateful nation, and we will never forget them. Thank you so much.
And please be seated. Let's give the Jazz Ensemble another round of applause. That was a wonderful rendition. As we remember those who gave their lives so that we can live in freedom, it also seems appropriate that we should remember those who never came home. I'd like to introduce David Gevorkian to present the POW MIA ceremony. David is a 22-year resident of the city of Glendale and has served in various local, county, and nonprofit positions, including the Los Angeles County Economic Development Corporation and the Los Angeles County Assessor's Office. He has also served on the Audit Committee and for the City of Glendale and the Glendale Unified School District's Bond Oversight Committee.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As a resident of a community that is home to thousands of veterans from various generations, it is my distinct honor to lead us in the POW MIA table ceremony. And those who have served in the armed forces of the United States of America are ever mindful that the sweetness of enduring peace has always been tainted by the bitterness of personal sacrifice. We are compelled to never forget that while we enjoy our daily pleasures, our privileges, and our rights, there are others who have endured and may still be enduring the agonies of pain, deprivation, and internment. And those heroes that are missing from our ranks, they are called POWs, they are called MIAs, they are called comrades. But we call them brothers and sisters. They are unable to be with their loved ones and families today, so we join together to pay our tribute to them and bear witness to their continued absence. This honor ceremony symbolizes that they are here with us today, here in spirit, here in the depths of our hearts and in the impressions of our memories. Before we continue, let us pause to reflect together, acknowledge their absence, and recognize our prisoners of war and those missing in action. At this time, I kindly ask us to stand and remain standing for a moment of silent prayer, to remember and honor the men and women, the brothers and sisters, the friends and neighbors who are prisoners of war or missing in action from all branches of our armed forces. Let us remember and honor those in the United States Air Force. Let us remember and honor those in the United States Army. Let us remember and honor those in the United States Navy. Let us remember and honor those in the U.S. Marine Corps. Let us remember and honor those in the U.S. Coast Guard. Thank you. Please be seated. I would like to explain the symbolism of this ceremony, and I call your attention to this small table. It is a place of dignity and honor. It is a table set for all our prisoners of war and those missing in action from all wars that our great nation has endured. This table is set for one. It is small, symbolizing the frailty of one prisoner alone against his or her suppressors. The empty place represents Americans still missing from each of the 5 services: the Army, the Navy, the Marine Corps, the Air Force, the Coast Guard, and of course, civilians who did not separate themselves from the responsibility of service and patriotism. You may have noticed that the table is round. It shows our everlasting concern for those that gave the greatest sacrifice for our freedom and prosperity. Let us remember. You may have noticed the tablecloth. It is white, symbolizing the purity of their intentions to respond to our country's call to arms so that we and our children could remain free from oppression. Let us remember. And notice the lone candle, which symbolizes the frailty of a prisoner alone, trying to stand against his or her oppressors. And the candle is lit. And the candle is lit to symbolize the upward reach of their unconquerable spirit. And the candle is reminiscent of the light of hope which lives in our hearts to illuminate their way home, away from their captors, and into the open arms of a grateful nation. Let us remember. And the ribbon on the candle reminds us of those who will not be coming home. Let us remember. And the red ribbon on the vase represents the thousands who demand a proper accounting of our missing who are not among us today. Let us remember. And the rose, a single rose, reminds us of the loved ones and families of our comrades in arms who keep their faith and await their return. While the red color of the rose signifies the blood they have shed to ensure the freedom of our great United States of America, let us remember. And you may have noticed that there's a slice of lemon on the bread plate. It is there to remind us of their bitter fate if we don't bring them home. Let us remember. And there's a pinch of salt on that plate, symbolizing the salty tears of their families as they wait and remember. And you may have noticed the glass, the inverted glass. The glass is inverted because they cannot toast with us today but maybe tomorrow, if we remember. And as we look upon this empty table, let us honor and remember our veterans, not as ghosts from the past, but as the souls of our present and the spirits of our future. And for those of you who have served with them, and those who depended upon their might and aid, since you are here today, then surely they have not forsaken you. We must all remember. And upon retiring the table, and as the cadet extinguishes this candle, let us transfer its flame into our own hearts. Let us remember now and forget never.
As is our tradition here in Glendale, and to honor those that have fallen so that we may live in freedom, we will now have the laying of the roses as presented by the Crescenta Valley Junior ROTC. We start with those that we remember and in memory of those from World War I. In memory of those from World War II. In memory of those from the Korean War. In memory of those from the Vietnam War. And in memory of those from the War on Terror. Thank you to the Crescenta Valley Junior ROTC. Let's give them a hand for their support of our event this year. It is now my privilege to introduce our keynote speaker, Colonel Paul Raggio. Colonel Raggio served in the United States Army for 26 years, retiring with the rank of colonel. During his military career, he worked in the areas of law enforcement, resource management, and congressional relations. He commanded military police units at the battalion and brigade level, including the Army's only military police paratrooper unit. His career also included assignments working for the Joint Chiefs of Staff and he is a veteran of Operations Just Cause and Desert Shield. Paul's many awards include the Defense Superior Service Medal, Legion of Merit Medal, Bronze Star Medal, Defense Meritorious Service Medal, Service Commendation Medal, Army Commendation Medal, Army Achievement Medal, and Joint Meritorious Unit Award. It is my pleasure to introduce and invite Colonel Paul Raggio to the podium.
Well, before I get started, it's good to be home. I grew up in Glendale and graduated from Hoover High School, as did my brother, and my sister went to Glendale High School. So, but I'm honored to be here today. Ordinary Americans doing extraordinary things. We have an obligation and a duty to remember them. It was a gorgeous spring day. The smell of bacon, biscuits, and coffee were in the morning air. Men stirred, causing their equipment to clang. Commands were barked out. Soldiers, still tired from the long march the day before, were slowly assembling with their muskets and pistols and securing ball ammunition and powder. The officers were huddled going over battle plans, plans that were fairly straightforward. Move to contact, hold key terrain at all costs, find and exploit the enemy's seam, then close on the enemy, and if ammunition runs out, fix bayonets, charge, and engage in hand-to-hand combat to secure the day's objectives. The sergeants were bucking their troops up, chanting familiar war cries and maneuvering them into position. Both the officers and sergeants knew what was coming, but blocked the images from their minds. Images and sounds imprinted and lived over and over, again and again, until that's all they experienced, whether asleep or awake. They felt deep down that this battle most likely was a turning point in the war. Soldiers, anxious and uncertain of their fate, responded lethargically to their sergeant's commands. Their minds drifted to family, friends, and home, joys of past and dreams of future. They blocked out any thoughts about what was in front of them. Instead, they eyed their battle buddies, who served as their constellation of courage and pride, knowing that their life depended on the performance of those around them. The waiting was the hardest part. You could hear and see distant movement. You constantly looked for cover, and you did what you could to conceal yourself. Men often searched for and found God in moments like this, asking why he had forsaken them, then surrendering to his will. The cannon booms rang out, iron tubes spitting out round after round of canister shot, a relatively new and highly lethal ammunition that spewed hundreds of small lead and iron balls through the air, ripping their intended human targets to shreds. Attrition warfare for the last hundreds of years was how battles were won. Kill or maim more of the enemy than what the enemy could kill of you. This is what the officers and sergeants knew, that soon the green pasture would be littered with dead, bodies frozen in time, dreams crushed, and the horrific sounds and images of war imprinted on their memories forever. Memorial Day saw its beginnings shortly after the Civil War. The war ended in the spring of 1865, claimed more lives than any conflict in the U.S. history, and required the establishment of the country's first national cemeteries. About 5.5 million troops served in the Civil War, of which 620,000 countrymen perished on our nation's soil. Numbers so large it's hard for us to imagine such death today. Ordinary Americans doing extraordinary things. We have an obligation and a duty to remember them. By the late 1860s, Americans in various towns and cities had begun holding springtime tributes to these countless fallen soldiers, decorating their graves with flowers and reciting prayers. It is unclear where exactly this tradition originated. Numerous different communities may have independently initiated the memorial gatherings. For decades, Memorial Day, Decoration Day was observed on May 30th, but in 1968, Congress passed the Uniform Monday Holiday Act, which established Memorial Day as the last Monday in May and declared it a federal holiday. Too often we lose sight of the importance of this day. It's dubbed the official start of the summer season by many. Memorial Day sales are constantly streamed in the media weeks before and after the solemn day. For a soldier, airman, seaman, Marine, or Coast Guardman, one of our greatest fears is dying for your country and being forgotten. A death freely given to protect our country's liberties and freedoms. Less than 1% of our population serves, and far less die nowadays compared to the 1860s because of advanced warfare technology, battle tactics, and medical advances. Nevertheless, ordinary Americans doing extraordinary things died for our nation, and we have an obligation and duty to remember them. Cornelius H. Charlton was his name. He was born July 24th, 1929, in East Gulf, West Virginia. He was the 8th of 17 children born to Van Charlton, a coal miner, and Clara Charlton, a housewife. Cornelius wanted to join the Army from a young age and begged his parents to let him enlist while in high school so he could see some action at the close of World War II. They refused, and he waited until he graduated, left for basic combat training in November 1946. Because he was an African American, he entered the segregated ranks. Not until 1948 did President Truman order the desegregation of the military. Cornelius was initially assigned to the occupation of Japan and given an administrative job on Okinawa. However, he pressed his command to get him in to fight in the Korean War and was eventually assigned to the 1st Battalion, 24th Infantry Regiment, part of the 25th Infantry Division, a de facto segregated unit made up almost entirely of African American men, led by white officers. Cornelius had been promoted and assigned as a platoon sergeant. In late May and early June 1951, the 8th Army launched Operation Pile Driver, a concentrated effort to push Chinese and North Korean troops further north and out of South Korea. The 25th Infantry Division advanced as part of this operation, and on June 2nd, Cornelius' company moved to capture Hill 543 to the village of Chipori. The hill was protected by heavily entrenched Chinese infantry as well as mortars at the top of the hill. During their first attempt to advance up the hill, the company took heavy casualties, and the 3rd platoon leader was mortally wounded. Cornelius took command of the platoon and reorganized it for another attack. Heavy fire eventually forced the company back down the hill. 3 times, Cornelius led the platoon up the hill in the force of intense Chinese mortar and infantry fire. In spite of mounting casualties, the platoon made slow progress. Cornelius single-handedly destroyed 2 Chinese positions and killed 6 Chinese soldiers with rifle fire and grenades. During one advance, Cornelius was wounded in the chest, but he refused medical treatment and pushed the company forward. Cornelius continued to lead the attack from the front of the platoon and several times was separated from the unit. Subsequent accounts noted Cornelius continued the advance, holding his chest wound with one hand and an M1 carbine with the other. Under Cornelius' leadership, the platoon managed to overcome the Chinese infantry positions, but he spotted a Chinese bunker on the far side of the top of the hill from which mortars were firing on them. As recounted by Private First Class Ronald Holmes, one of the men in the platoon, Cornelius decided to destroy the bunker, and with his last known words, "Let's go," he urged the platoon forward, charging at the front of the formation ahead of the rest of the men. In one final action, Cornelius advanced alone to the top of the hill and the location of the Chinese mortars firing repeatedly on the emplacement there. The Chinese troops wounded Cornelius one final time with a grenade, but he continued firing until the position was destroyed. Cornelius subsequently died from the wounds inflicted by the grenade. However, he is credited with saving much of his platoon, which had been under heavy fire, and Cornelius was 21 when he died, and for his heroic actions was awarded the Medal of Honor. Cornelius truly was an ordinary American doing extraordinary things. We have an obligation and a duty to remember him. Shannon Kent was her name. Washington Post writer Missy Ryan tells her story. She was the daughter of a teacher and state trooper and lived in small New York town. She had a knack for languages. Her father and uncle, a Staten Island firefighter, were first responders on September 11th to the Twin Towers in Manhattan. Those events inspired Shannon to enlist in the Navy in 2003. As a cryptologist, and she qualified to special in the most challenging of languages. She chose Arabic because she wanted to be at the tip of the spear for the 9/11 response. Right away, Shannon began banging on doors to get overseas. In 2007, she landed a spot on a team supporting Navy SEALs who conducted nightly raids in Iraq. She used her Arabic skills to pull together intelligence on terrorism suspects and went out on a few SEAL operations. Women were just starting to be included in special operations missions as male troops encountered resistance to interactions with local women. After that deployment, she was asked to try out for a permanent position on a SEAL support team. In 2008, Shannon, 5'8" and 125 pounds, found herself pounding down a beach in full body armor, training for the next fight. In 2012, she was sent to rural Afghanistan to support a SEAL team. It was a rough deployment. Her team lost multiple people. Shannon told family and friends she was starting to earn the respect she craved, working in the heavy world of special operators. The value of a cryptologist, part linguist, part intelligence analyst, wasn't always obvious. Especially in the initial years after 9/11, women faced a lot of skepticism on those teams. Shannon began working alongside SEALs nearly a decade before the Pentagon opened all combat roles, including special operations jobs to female troops. In an era of insurgent conflicts without front lines, women, like Shannon, were already a repudiation of notions that female service members weren't exposed to combat. In 2013, a friend set Shannon up with a Green Beret, Joe Kent. They fell in love, were married the following Christmas Eve, and bought a house overlooking Maryland's Severn River, both thinking it was a great place to start a family. The following year, Joe headed off on 2 more Iraq deployments, and he missed both of Shannon's pregnancies, but fortunately was home for the birth of Colt in 2015 and Josh in 2017. Both boys named after colleagues killed in action. In 2018, Joe decided to retire, and Shannon, although committed to progressing in the Navy, decided it best to find a career path that would reduce the number and risk of deployments. During her pregnancies, she started a master's in military psychology, which led her to compete for the Navy's PhD program. Shannon was elated to learn she had secured one of 10 active duty slots for the program. But there was a problem. Between her pregnancies, she had gotten diagnosis of thyroid cancer. The cancer was caught early and did not require chemotherapy. But she had to be commissioned as an officer to enter the PhD program, and doing so required the same clean bill of health that anyone joining the military for the first time, must have. The Navy determined the cancer made her medically unfit. She applied for a waiver and was denied. Nevertheless, the Navy did deem her fit to continue to serve and notified her that her linguistic skills were needed in Syria. So after 2 pregnancies and 5 years without a combat deployment, Shannon felt compelled to reestablish her combat credentials. Joe and Shannon figured the odds that she would be fine. This wasn't Iraq of 2007 when Americans were blown up every day. On January 16th, Shannon texted Joe from Syria, letting him know that she would be out on a mission. The city of Manbij had mostly been quiet since militants were pushed out by Kurdish forces who worked closely with the Americans. But like anywhere in Syria, Americans were a target. It was around midday when Shannon's team moved through a busy market area in central Manbij. Stepping past butcher cases and columns of shawarma meat, they entered the Palace of Princes. The Islamic State was watching as Shannon and a small team of Americans slipped into a bright kebab restaurant. It was a favorite haunt of Americans in the city. A man hiding a suicide vest under his dark clothing pushed past people on the sidewalk. Within seconds, a fireball swept through the dining room, blowing out the restaurant's front entrance and scorching people walking by outside. Shannon and 3 other Americans were killed. The deadliest attack on U.S. forces in the campaign against the Islamic State. She became the first female service member to die in combat in that conflict, shining a light on the mostly invisible role of women in the shadowy, testosterone-filled world of special operations. Shannon was 35 when she died and was posthumously promoted to Senior Chief Petty Officer and awarded the Joint Service Commendation Medal. It was her 5th combat tour. Shannon truly was an ordinary American doing extraordinary things, and we have an obligation and a duty to remember her. Kim Orlando was his name. He was my operations officer when I commanded the 16th Military Police Brigade Airborne, the only paratrooper MP brigade in the Army. He enlisted in the Army as a military policeman in 1982 and was commissioned at Fort Benning, Georgia in 1986. He served in the 1991 Persian Gulf War and thereafter rose quickly to the rank of lieutenant colonel. He was picked to study at the FBI's National Academy in Quantico, Virginia, an exclusive honor for military policemen. Kim was the best of the best and fortunate enough to be selected to lead the 716th Military Police Battalion out of Fort Campbell, Kentucky, into battle in Iraq. The battalion comprised no fewer than 400 soldiers, and Kim made it a point to learn the name of each one. His soldiers and his family were paramount to Kim. When not on duty, he spent as much time as possible with his wife, Sherry, and his 2 teenage sons, Gregory and Jason. It happened on October 16, 2003. Kim was killed in Karbala, Iraq, while attempting to negotiate with armed men who were congregating on a road near a mosque after curfew. Unfortunately, I was not able to attend Kim's funeral, but my friend Colonel Rex Forney did and gives the following account. Lieutenant Colonel Kim Orlando was laid to rest Friday, where he had told his wife he always wanted to be buried. Among the rows and rows of soldiers interred at the Veterans National Cemetery in Nashville, Tennessee. In typical 101st Airborne Division fashion, the Screaming Eagles pulled out all the plugs to honor a great soldier, leader, husband, and father of 2. As a military police battalion commander, he understood the dangers of military operations in urban terrain. He knew where the most danger potentially would be on the night of 16 October, and that was where he was. As ground forces often have to do, he was eyeball to eyeball with bad people, displaying the unrelenting determination and absolute resolve of the American soldier and this country's commitment to the global war on terrorism. The firefight was brutal and intense. The results are now history. The 716th Military Police Battalion recovered their dead, evacuated the wounded, accounted for their sensitive items of equipment, redistributed ammunition, and continued with the mission. As of that date, Kim had the distinction of being the highest ranking officer killed in hostile fire in Iraq. Comrades, just as I do, remembered Kim as never hesitating to lead his soldiers personally up front, whether on a 3-mile run in below freezing temperatures, jumping out of a perfectly good aircraft with troops in tow, or on patrols in the streets of Karbala. Kim, 43, was posthumously awarded the Bronze Star and the Purple Heart. Kim truly was an ordinary American doing extraordinary things, and we have an obligation and a duty to remember him. There are thousands of accounts such as these that crossed the 3 centuries of wars our country has fought. We know the soldiers, airmen, seamen, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen. There are fathers, mothers, brothers, sisters, uncles, aunts, cousins, friends, and fellow countrymen. These fallen warriors truly represent the demographics of our country. All races, all genders, all ethnicities, all religions, and all defenders of our nation and the democratic values our great republic stands for. We have an obligation and a duty to remember the sacrifice these ordinary Americans made doing extraordinary things. So when our nation's flag is raised or taps is played and we sing the national anthem or recite the Pledge of Allegiance while rendering a salute or with palm over heart, we must remember those who gave their life in order to preserve ours while living in this great country, the United States of America. The price they paid in blood, spilled for our freedom, must never, ever be forgotten. Thank you, folks.
Believing is all we can do, with the hope that we live for too. But the greatest of these is love. Let me talk about it, sing about it. Well, some people, they take the high road, never allowing themselves to open up and let somebody come in. No, all the time spent got in the high they could have been, learning the simple, simple things that make the world go round and round. Never too late. No better time than today. take the high road, never allowing themselves to open up and let somebody come in. Oh, all the time spent, God didn't know how they could have been. Learning the simple, simple things that makes the world go round and round. Believing is all we can do, with the hope that we live for two. But the greatest of these is love. Let me talk about it, sing about it. Believing is all we can do, with the hope that we live for two. But the greatest of these is love. Let me talk about it, sing about it. Believing is all we can do, with the hope that we live for two. But the greatest of these is love. Let me talk about it, sing about it. Believing is all we can do, with the hope that we live for two. But the greatest of these is love. Let me talk about it, sing about it. Believing is all we can do, with the hope that we live for two. But the greatest of these is love. Let me talk about it, sing about it. Believing is all we can do, with the hope that we live for two. But the greatest of these is love. Let me talk about it, sing about it.
Thank you, Colonel. Thank you, Colonel Raggio, for the keynote address, and thank you to the Glendale College Jazz Ensemble and the choir for their musical selection. America is indeed a wonderful country, and we do much to honor those who gave their lives to make it as it is today. Please enjoy this day and remember to spend a little extra time remembering those who gave all so that we can be here and that we are here to be able to celebrate their lives and sacrifices. I'd like to take just a few moments to say thank you to some of the organizations that made this event possible. To the Patriotism Committee of the Glendale Veterans Coalition for putting this event together. Would you please all stand? We have one special acknowledgement this year, Norma Smallbone, who has been a member of the committee for 20 years, and the person who designs all of the programs and the buttons that are here will be stepping off the committee. We would like to thank her for everything that she has done. And Norma, we have some flowers for you. He doesn't know I'm going to do this, but Don Biggs, who is really the main organizer and driver of bringing this all together, who's been doing this for over 20 years as well, is also going to be stepping off the committee. So Don, thank you for making this program what it is, and thank you not only for your service in the United States military and the fire department, but thank you to your service to the community in this volunteer capacity. And also, if you would kindly keep Carvel Gay in your thoughts and prayers. He is a longtime committee member and co-chair of this event. He was hospitalized for a fall this week, and we wish him a speedy recovery. To all of the organizations that donated wreaths that make the backdrop here, and there are many of them this year, please stand as I just read your names so that you can be acknowledged. The Armenian National Committee of America, the Glendale Chapter, the Glendale Homeowners Coordinating Council, the Glendale City Employees Association, the Glendale Board of Realtors, Glendale Elks Lodge 1289, the Glendale Historical Society, the Glendale Kiwanis Club, the Glendale Management Association, the Glendale Masonic Lodge number 368, the Glendale Police Officers Association, Glendale Sunrise Rotary, Jewel City Kiwanis, and Verdugo Woodlands West Homeowners Association. Please thank them for the wreaths. We thank Adam Schiff for the American flag that will fly over the monument this next year. As you leave this place, I encourage you to make the name of someone on that wall personal. They were our neighbors, our friends. They were young members of our Glendale community who made the supreme sacrifice, and there are many of them, and there are too many of them. There are 6 names on our wall from World War I, 172 from World War II, 63 from the Vietnam War, and 10 from the War on Terror. Each and every one of those was a member of our community and answered the call of their country, and today we live under the blanket of freedom that they provided. We also have a battle cross placed to the right of the monument, which was donated, and it is a tribute to everyone who gave all in the service to their country. Also, after this ceremony concludes, we would like to invite you to stop by one of our veterans booths at the parking lot to my right. We have some commemorative buttons recognizing the 75th anniversary of D-Day. Please stop by and pick one up. Also following this program, American Legion Post 127 is having a barbecue to celebrate its 100th year anniversary. Veterans and their friends are invited to attend, and they are located at 714 West Wilson, and the barbecue begins at 11 a.m. And if you have a moment, you might take a chance to stop by Forest Lawn Glendale to see their Field of Honor, over 1,000 American flags displayed in a field, and each of those flags represents and honors one of our fallen heroes. Now, if you would kindly please stand while Pastor Kinnison leads us in the benediction. After the benediction, there will be the playing of taps, which will formally conclude today's ceremony. Again, thank you so much for coming today. Pastor Kinnison.
Almighty God, our gratitude for your generosity grows with each passing day. We acknowledge the special blessings of this day. We have honored and remembered those who now enjoy your eternal embrace. We ask your blessings on all who now leave this sacred place. Especially do we seek your comfort for those bereaved and grieving. May your grace be with them and us, both now and forever. Amen.